What do cricketers do in the off-season?
Well, most of the guys, they generally play overseas, abroad. You get the guys playing, having county stints, IPL as well. You know, you got a large number of our guys involved in the IPL. But myself specifically, I'm not involved in any of those two. So I've just been relaxing, being at home. You know, I'm staying away from cricket as much as I can. I've also tried to make time to go back to Cape Town just to visit the family and the extended family. But yeah, I think the biggest thing for me is just being away from cricket.
Let's go back to Cape Town with you and go back a few years and ask you about when you realized that cricket for you could be more than just fun. In other words, that you could do something with it and make it part of your life.
I think later on in my formative years, about 17, 18, I realized, cricket could be something more than just a passion, more than just fun. Growing up, that's what cricket was about. It was just fun. It was just a platform for me to express myself, and through my schooling years as well, it was just that for me. And then I think I was in matric. I made the Gauteng under-19 team.
Yes.
That got selected to go to the Coca-Cola week, which is the national under-19 week. I think it's called the Kaya Majola week. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there I got selected for the representative side over there. I think SA Colts or SA Schools. And from then onwards, understanding, the whole meaning or significance of making that team, I saw cricket as more than just a game, really. Cricket
was in your family. Tell us who made a difference. Uncles, parents, who were the people that guided you into this very difficult game?
Yeah, my uncles from my mother's side, they were heavily involved in cricket. Actually, various different sports, but cricket was one of them. So from an early age, I used to go, to the stadium. The stadium wasn't too far where we lived, and I watch my uncles play there, and I think that's where the seed was kind of planted. Also in the community that I grew up with, Langa in Cape Town, there's a keen interest in sport, cricket being one of them. And playing street cricket, playing street soccer,
mm-hmm.
That's where the passion was fueled. And I think I attribute my passion to the game, to number one, my family and the community that I was born into.
Did your family say to you, play and have fun, or did your family say to you, play, practice hard, because one day you could be a seriously good player? How did they draw you in?
I think it was different from both of my parents. They had different perspectives. I think my mother she took to my passion, towards cricket. I mean, she obviously saw it from her brothers, being my uncle, that they were involved in sport. So she kind of understood my craze, towards cricket. Whereas my dad, for him, cricket was almost just, something you do in your spare time. But what's important is that you go to school, you pass matric, you go to university, you get a degree, and, get into the business world. So it was a different perspective from both parents. But I think as things started developing and I got to higher levels, they started understanding why I was so crazy about the sport.
So I want to read to you, and I'm sure this has been quoted to you before. This is Temba Bavuma in grade 6S at SACS, I think. And English. All the children in the class had to write, "Where I see myself in 15 years." This is you. "I see myself in 15 years standing in my suit and shaking Mr. Mbeki's hand, congratulating me for making the South African side. If I do, I would definitely thank my coaches and parents who support me all the way, and especially my two uncles who gave me the skills of being one. I would also want to be an accountant because I'm very good at maths, like my father, who encouraged me to be one, and also who gets a lot of money too." So obviously, Thabo Mbeki is no longer president of South Africa and couldn't have been, but leave that aside as a detail. But as a young man, you had a very clear idea of what it is you wanted to do.
Yeah, it's actually quite embarrassing.
Why?
Hearing that piece that I wrote. I mean, there's quite a lot of cockiness and arrogance that come about there. But I think the belief was always there. That I could be something. With cricket. Like I mentioned there with my uncles. They were always there. They're still there now. Trying to support me wherever they can in the sport. And I think I also mentioned about my father, with the whole accounting and him pushing, the education side of things. But I think from a young age, I always had that inner self-belief.
How did that work at home? Because there's only so many hours in the day, and you've got your dad on the one hand saying, hey, keep an eye on school. I want to see those maths marks up where they should be. And then you've got other people saying, hey, we've got a game on Saturday. Let's practice. Let's put some time in with bat and ball. Was that ever a tension, or did you always, in your own mind, have an idea of which activity belonged where?
I think in my mind, cricket, was always the number one. I always prioritized cricket over education. But I knew, at the end of the semester, I had to put down a report, that showed good numbers. So I had to try find the balance, between the two. I remember instances where my dad on the weekend would force me, to work on my maths. I'd sit there on the Sunday from the morning till the evening just doing math sums, practicing. And then Saturday was dedicated to cricket. When I used to come back from a cricket match, he'd make me write an essay.
Straight as soon as you got home?
As soon as I got home.
No, put your feet up and watch football on TV?
Nah, nothing like that. Football, I used to hear the highlights from my friends. So, I had to try find the balance. And I think later on, I remember in my matric year, because that's when cricket got a bit serious, there was a lot of tension. There were instances where I chose to prioritize cricket, missing school days because we had to go play a game for the first class team. And that obviously didn't sit well with my dad. But with my mother supporting me, it kind of, luckily because I had my mother on my side, I was able to get away with a bit more than I think anyone would get away with.
Well, that's interesting to have your mom backing you on that. I want to talk about those games of street cricket, because you said to me just before we started the interview, we were just chatting, and you said there's not as much cricket in the street as there used to be when you were growing up. Is that because kids are playing less sport in the streets generally, or is it a sign of progress that there are places where they can play perhaps more formally in a decent facility? What's going on?
I think, you could say it's a sign of process. I remember, me being a young guy growing up there, we used to play various sports where in the morning you'd be playing cricket, and then when it got dark we used to play soccer. But what was also quite evident is that the older guys were also involved. So now I think in these times, us being the older guys, we're not as involved. So you almost have a situation where the younger guys, they don't have, that passion being instilled or being thrown back at them. And I think also social economic issues. The kids unfortunately are more invested in other not so positive things in the community. And things are definitely not the same as it was when I was young. I enjoyed playing street cricket or street soccer. It was very, very competitive. I mean, as a 13 or 14-year-old, you're playing against guys that are 19. You know what I mean? And a guy that's older than you, he doesn't want to be outskilled by a younger guy. So if you're playing soccer, it's not a natural thing for an older guy to kick you because you outskilled him or something. So it was very competitive, and it kind of prepared you, for other challenges, ahead. But it's not as street cricket or street sport really is not as prevalent
as it was, and not as rich. Now, let's picture the young Temba Bavuma in Rubusana Avenue, around where you lived, and you playing cricket. Yeah. And here's one of your old friends, Andile Krein. He's quoted as saying, "He was a good batsman. He used to stay there for hours. Some of us would go and eat and come back, and he was still batting. We had to swear at him to get his mind off or just bully him. He would not get out, so we just took the bat from him." I see a picture of maybe you were the youngest, certainly perhaps one of the smaller children in the game, and I see a picture of a very determined, stubborn young man. Is that who you were, or were you just skilled?
I think I was definitely one of the smallest, if not the smallest. Like I said, we were playing against older guys, so that kind of made it a bit more competitive. And being one of the smaller guys, physically, less than the other guys, I had to draw a bit more from my mental side, and that's where the things of determination, to prove to the guys that you can play with them, just because they are a head taller than you, it means nothing. I definitely am stubborn, so that hasn't nothing there has changed. But yeah, I remember Andile is a good friend of mine, and I still see him now, and we're still reminiscent, of all those memories when we used to do battle out there in the streets.
Yeah, I mean that's the unique thing about cricket. If you're batting, somebody else can't bat. I mean, there might be someone at the other end, but only two people can bat. So I would imagine that some people got a little impatient with you and your tight hold on the bat when they were waiting to bat. He said they used to try and put you off and sledge you a little bit. Can you remember what people said? Was there anything that stuck in your mind?
To be honest, I don't remember what they said, but they were very, very aggressive towards me.
Yes.
I mean, well, aggressive towards anyone that was that became a thorn.
Yeah.
Towards them. But yeah, it was just natural competitiveness, amongst sportsmen, and just trying to get one over the other.
Do you think, though, even though it was amongst friends and it was close to home, do you think that has served you in good stead, that you grew up in an atmosphere where cricket, not a polite game at all, was played with lots of mental pressure, even if it was just in your own neighborhood, in your own backyard? Do you think that's helped you when you're in front of 20,000 people at Newlands?
I think, yeah, to a large extent it has assisted me in my game. Coming from street cricket where it's quite aggressive, it's quite competitive, and then going into school cricket where you play against other races, other cultures, and there, I experienced a lot of like sledging and things like that. So when it happens in school cricket, I had ways to deal with it because it is something that I was accustomed to it, back home. And even now, it's something that I know is part of my game. I know guys are gonna be coming at me, saying whatever from a sledging point of view. So I think I have mental ways to deal with it all.
When you talk about going to play, young man, grew up in the township, although you were at a school in I suppose what was white suburban Cape Town at Sax. Was any of the sledging and that you experienced in schools cricket, was any of it personal? Was any of it directed at you in a particular way because you were black?
Yeah, there were instances where the sledging did cross the line, from a racial point of view. But I mean, I was quite young. I think I might have also, reacted negatively towards those kind of comments. But there were definitely issues.
You're listening to Kai FM on 95.9. We're chatting to South African cricketer Temba Bavuma, a fascinating story that started in the streets of Langa Township down in Cape Town, led all the way to Newlands, and a century that many, many of you will remember from last season's tour by England, and of course a whole future ahead of him, which we're going to chat about as well. Temba, a lot of people are talking about how we grow the game and how we make sure that more young black South Africans feel, A, that cricket is a game for them, but B, get the opportunity to play. And I'm wondering if that will ever really be possible on scale if we don't get cricket into our schools. What are your thoughts on that? Because in a sense you had to move out of Langa for education to get a real opportunity to play schools cricket.
Yeah, I think the key word for me there in your question is the opportunity. I think, if you go to the township, whatever there is, I mean, the talent is there. Whether you talk about cricket, you talk about rugby or soccer, whatever it is, the talent is there amongst your black Africans. And I think it's just a matter of the opportunity is not there. The guys don't have, readily access, to these quality facilities, to the elite coaching, and something, where I was at an advantage is that, I got drafted into a school like Sax in Cape Town and finished off here at St. David's in Johannesburg, where I grew up in that system, in that environment, and my talent was kind of nurtured, and I was able to get to the point where I am. And a lot is said and a lot has been done about transformation, and you see the whole quotas being implemented at franchise level. You see the target guidelines that are implemented at senior level being South Africa, but maybe from an infrastructure point of view, not enough really is being done at grassroots level. Whenever I go to Cape Town, where we stay in Langa, we stay opposite a school. It's a primary school that inhabits a majority of the kids in Langa. And there they've got absolutely no facilities. There's no cricket nets there. There's no soccer field. There's no rugby. So the kids have the talent, but they don't have an environment where they can use their talent. So maybe you want a situation where a bit more is done at grassroots levels, and people should hold a long-term view in terms of the results, in terms of, seeing the quality come about.
Share with us your thoughts about the Langa Cricket Club, because that was your nursery, that was where you learned the game, that's where you got an opportunity to play. How important are clubs like that, and could that be perhaps an easier model to roll out, that we make sure there's a strong cricket club serving a number of schools? That might be a quicker way of doing it than trying to get every school in a position where they have facilities. Not that I'm looking for shortcuts, but I'm wondering if the cricket club is perhaps the right environment for getting young players in.
Yeah, I think the clubs, serve an important platform, or channel for the kids to get involved, in their sports. Langa itself, just looking at Langa, the community, there's a rich culture, in sport, from cricket, from soccer. The community is actively involved, in the sporting activity. So it's very easy. It was very easy for us young guys to get into sport because of that interest, that high interest from the community. And Langa itself, the cricket club, has a rich culture, of cricket. There were guys before me, who made a name for themselves. And I think it could be a solution where, that kind of model there at Langa Cricket Club, is replicated, around the country. But if I look around the country, like here at Soweto, there's a strong culture there. There are guys before me who represented, first class cricket. And maybe it could be a matter of, those clubs need to be administratively managed a whole lot better. Support from above, support from your corporates need to be, channeled through those clubs, and make sure that those clubs are in tip top shape.
In terms of cricket and batting on the one hand, bowling on the other, you came through as a batsman, Makaya before you, Kagiso, I guess at the same time as you, Kagiso Rabada, Monde Zondeki, again a bowler. How important do you think it is that you've come through as a batsman, that there isn't developed this kind of stereotype that black players are always going to be bowlers, much the way people expect black rugby players to always be on the wing?
I think if you look at cricket itself, cricket is you can regard cricket as almost like an elite sport, almost like a white collar sport, if I could say. It's quite expensive as a batter to make it. I mean, all the kit that you have, whereas a bowler, you just need a pair of tackies. You get given a ball and you just run in and bowl. Hence why you see a large majority of our black African cricketers, are bowlers. And the fact that the role models before me were bowlers, it kind of inspire the guys, to become like your Mondes and Dekis, your Makai and Tinis. And I think, it's obviously quite a breath of fresh air that you've got a guy who's a batter, who's gotten to that level. And I think the guys will have a stronger belief in them that if Temba can get there, Temba comes from the same roots that they are currently in, they can also get there.
Let's talk a little bit about batting, because one mistake and you're gone. If you bowl a bad ball, you might get hit for 4, but you've got another 5 in that over, and you've got overs after that where you can put it right. It must be one of the most difficult things in sport. Maybe I say that because I was so hopeless at cricket myself. But is it uniquely difficult batting, do you think? Because not only does one mistake get you out, but you might sit for a day and a half before you even get back on the field again.
Yeah, I think that's the contrasting factor between, batting and bowling. Bowling, you've got ample, chances, opportunity to redeem yourself, whereas batting, generally one mistake, you're out. But in saying that, as a batter, that's the beauty of being a batsman, with that added element of pressure, if I could say. When you do well, you kind of revel in that in that mastery, if I could call it. And for me, it's just trying to enjoy that process of batting. Don't think of you getting to 100, but more just the moment that you're in, and just trying to enjoy that process of batting.
Do you empty your head, or do you fill your head with what's happening in the moment? So between balls, the ball's bowled, something happens, you step away, the bowler goes back to the top of his run-up. In that moment before you take guard again, what are you thinking?
I think it's quite important that you have clarity in your mind,
Mm-hmm.
in whatever decisions that you take. So in that moment, I generally, quickly, analyze the previous delivery.
Mm-hmm.
But after 5 seconds, I try, switch off. And then when the bowler's at his mark again, I try switch on. And that's where my focus, becomes on the next delivery. I try, be as much as I can in that moment. Because, what has happened before that means absolutely nothing. And what is going to happen what's going to happen after this ball means also nothing. So it's important that you try, stay and live in that moment so you can actually play that delivery to your best of ability.
Were you doing that instinctively as a young kid, as a teenager perhaps, or did some coach say to you, this is a discipline you've got to learn?
No, that's something that I learned in my later years.
Mm-hmm.
Joining first class cricket. I remember the coaches that I worked with, Lawrence Mahatlane, Grant Morgan. They generally said, you want to try be clear.
Mm-hmm.
Your focus must be on the ball, nothing else. But yeah, it's something that I learned later on in my cricketing years.
So it was taught to you. I always wonder if a batsman, particularly who's been playing a long innings, and whether when you step away you think to yourself, should I have pizza tonight or should I have a steak? Do you flush all of that out? Or does your life, because we all have lives beyond whatever we do, surely there are times when your life comes and taps on the side of your head and says, hey, you still need to go and pick up that couch for your flat or whatever?
I think as a batter, it's not an easy task, trying to, if you're going to seek to bat 50 overs straight, if you're playing a test match,
yes,
and you want to bat the whole day. So it's very important that you try switch on, and switching off. And switching on is, when it's your time to face the delivery as a batter. And then switching off is when your mind is completely away from that. And from my experience, I've had instances where I think, what am I going to, in between balls, what am I going to have for supper today? What am I going to do for my parents' birthday? I do think things like that. But once it's time for me to face the ball, then I kind of have to zone back in. But I think it's very important for you to switch on and switch off, just to give your mind that mental break in between balls.
Have you ever been really scared before a match, before going into bat?
I think I'm always, maybe not scared, but I'm always nervous.
Mm-hmm.
In any kind of game. I remember when I was a young guy, I always had to go to the toilet before I actually went into bat, and that still sometimes happen now. But the nerves are pretty much, part of the game. I kind of see it as a positive thing if I'm nervous before an innings, and I think it's more. And at a younger age, it used to affect my game in the sense that I'd end up playing differently because I'd allow the nerves, that emotion, to take over, and cloud my decision making. Whereas now, being older, I've kind of learned that, I've learned to embrace, that emotion. I've learned to calm myself down, during those pressure situations, to allow myself to execute as well as I can.
Let's talk about a specific precious situation, and the moment we celebrated at the beginning of the show, your maiden century for South Africa at Newlands against England. As you played that innings, was there any point at which you thought there's 100 in reach? Is that how your mind works? You get into the 50s, the 60s, does 100 start looming, or is that something you shut from your mind on that day?
I think Leading up to the game, well, as a batter, you're prepared to do well. And obviously doing well is getting 100, getting 150. So the ultimate goal is always to get to that milestone. And it, being my first milestone at that level was obviously something that was there in my head. But when the innings started and as my innings progressed, to be honest, I never had that thought. But once I got to around the 70, 80 mark, that's when I started looking up a bit more regularly at the scoreboard, and that's where, that thought of the milestone was in my head. But then again, you still got to try find ways to still be in the moment, and make sure that you are making the best decisions.
And the moment at which you knew that 100 was going to appear against your name, do you remember the feeling? Is it something that you still think of? Do you ever dream about it, by the way?
I remember edging the ball through the slip. They moved the fielder just before that ball. Stephen Finn was bowling. I remember edging the ball. And I remember running and turning to see if the third man, the guy in the field, was going to get to there. And I saw him give up. And at that moment, I realized, I'd got to the milestone. And the celebration itself, that was all spontaneous. It's very hard for me to explain, the emotions or what I was thinking. I was thinking at that time, seeing, I think the first people that I acknowledged were my parents. They were sitting, above me, straight above me. My dad, my mother, my sister, my uncle was also there. And obviously then after them were the team members. We're nothing without our team members. And seeing the joy on the guys' faces, that kind of made it a bit more extra special. But it's very hard for me. I've tried to explain the emotions, when people have asked me those questions, but it's very hard for me to explain, what exactly I was feeling. There was a mixture of relief, relief having finally got to that milestone, joy, seeing your parents, seeing your teammates, and also hearing the explosion amongst the spectators as well. That was also quite an eye-opening thing for me.
Did you ever think, okay, if I'm not going to be a cricketer, I would like to be fill in the blank, or has that never crossed your mind?
At a young age, I wanted to be a soccer player.
Okay.
To be honest, cricket kind of took over because of the schooling that I went to. Your private schools generally, prioritized, cricket or rugby over other sports. And because I was there in that system, that's where cricket took over. But I always wanted to be a soccer player.
Position?
Position, more in your attacking position, so midfielder, attacking midfielder, striker. I think now maybe, the height would be against me to be a striker, so I think more in the midfield.
How tall is Messi?
Messi, yeah, but Messi is very skilled. He's not the tallest of individuals, but he's very skilled.
People who know me will just say I'm just putting in a word for the short people that we can potentially do anything at all. I want to read to you a quote from Hashim Amla. This was soon after the Newlands game, and he said, "Temba and I have very similar careers. The first time you play Test cricket, everybody doubts you because of the colour of your skin, even though you've got the stats to back it up domestically." First of all, has that been a feature of your career that you felt there was an additional hurdle other than just the game? And if that hurdle was there, how have you overcome it?
Yeah, I can definitely reiterate Hashim Amla's words there. That's definitely a challenge that you face as a player of colour, if I can say. And I think from my side, for me, it was a bit more of an extra element to it all. I'm not the tallest of individuals, so having to deal with that attitude or perception that I'm not of the right height or of the right build to make it in sports. So I had to deal with that with that added bit of pressure as well, and that's something that I've been dealing with, that I've dealt from a young age. But having made it to international level, I think that attitude or perception is always there, that if a player of color is selected to represent it, unfortunately the people always question, is he there on merit? or is he there because of his ability? And until you do something of significance at that level, almost like what you've done before, it means nothing. But what you do at that level, that's when guys, will start seeing you in a different light. So, I mean, I agree 100% with Hashim Amla. And I don't think it's something that should, as an obstacle for players of color. It's almost, if you embrace that element, that added bit of pressure, you could turn that negative, sentiment, if I could say, into something positive and use it to improve your game.
I wonder, though, if that doesn't disadvantage perhaps certain kinds of personalities, because you've obviously developed a calm space in your head. But equally, there might be a young player who thinks, okay, I'm going to prove you wrong. And I would have thought one of the most dangerous things in a game of cricket with a bat in your hand is if you try to do something out of a sense of emotion, because isn't that where mistakes are made? And it seems to me fundamentally unfair that somebody has that additional thing. The bowling's difficult enough, the pitch isn't great, but in addition, you've got this little nagging voice behind you saying, well, why are you here in the first place? Doesn't that affect other people perhaps more negatively than you've allowed it to affect you?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's the way you look at that element or that added bit of pressure. Looking back at my career from a young guy, the way you've just put it, I definitely played under that emotion that I'm gonna prove it to my teammates. I'm gonna prove it to the coach that I can actually play here despite my so-called disadvantage of my height. And only later on, in my cricket, my early 20s, where I remember sitting down with one of the coaches and he said to me, I don't have to prove anything to anyone. And at that time it was very hard to accept, because I still felt that I was being, I don't want to say ostracized, but I still felt that I was being, looked past because of my build. So, but also because I think of my stubbornness, my inner belief, I kind of use that element to try, turn it into something positive and get me to where I wanted to be.
How many good players, young black players, do you think we're losing because of that additional pressure, because of that little cloud that they play under? There must be a drop-off. I'm not talking about people who necessarily would have played for South Africa, but would have moved up through club cricket, representative cricket in age group, provincial selections and so on. Aren't we losing players because of that?
I think if you were to take, all your first-class cricketers, black African first-class cricketers, put them in a room and ask them that question, how many of them feel that pressure that they need to, perform a bit more than others because of their color of the skin? You'll probably find that 90% of them feel that they have to, they have to perform a bit more. But, I don't want to say that it puts us at a disadvantage. I just feel that it's a pressure that you need to embrace. It's something that's there in front of you. It's not going anywhere. So, it's just an obstacle that you need to overcome. And how you overcome it, you just need to find a way from a mental point of view, to deal with that pressure, and do what you can do. What I've learned is that as an international cricketer, pressure is a big part of the game. Your skill takes you to a certain level, but then the pressure, for you to deal with the pressure, you have to draw back from your inner self, from your mental capability. So in a situation like this, where you're black, African cricketers, batsmen or whatever, they faced with a pressure like this, guys just need to find a way, internally to deal with it.
I want to step back from what we're talking about now and ask a broader question. South African cricket isn't in great shape at the moment. There seems to be quite a lot of self-doubt, both in the 5-day game and in the shorter formats. There's a committee now tasked with looking at the game. Do you have some thoughts on that? Is this just a cycle that teams have where perhaps some veterans move on, people like Jacques Cullis come to mind, Graham Smith, or do you think we've got a problem that we need to look at?
I think it's almost a situation where it might be a situation where an era has almost come to an end. I mean,
Yes.
you've lost great players like Jacques Callis, Graham Smith, Mark Boucher, and those aren't players that you can replace, in 3 months or in 6 months. And I think, the results that you see now is probably evident of that. And I think, obviously with our media and our fans, we have a high standard, when it comes to our sport. The guys expect us to be doing well, and rightly so. But I think, I attribute, our results to that point. And I mean, if you look at the team, there's a lot of inexperienced guys at the moment, guys who are still making their way, at international level. Guys like myself, guys like Dane Pete, Simon Homer, Kagiso Rabada, Dane Villas, those are just to name a few. So it's very, I think a bit more room, should be given, to the guys just to find their feet. And then, maybe after 2 years, just to put a time frame to it, you can probably see us replicating those same performances. But I mean, all the guys that have retired, Graham Smith, Jacques Callis, they didn't start doing well, in their first year of international cricket. It took them time for them to get to where they are. And so I think guys should maybe, keep that in mind. I don't believe that it's due to elements of transformation.
Yes.
And all of those policies that have been formulated. I don't attribute our poor performances to that. I think it's just a cycle, a new era that's starting.
It's interesting that you finish by saying that, because it wasn't there in my question at all, and in fact wasn't in my thinking at all. But is that an undercurrent in our sport in general, that you feel there is a constituency of people out there who will look to blame transforming the game, be it football, rugby or cricket, for a drop in performance? Is that a conversation that you feel is somewhere out there, even if you and I aren't having that conversation now?
I think in the conversations that I've been part of, in the conversation that I've heard, and things that I see on social media, transformation is always there on top of the list as to why the team lost, or as to why the performances of the team, are not where they should be. So that's why I mentioned it.
Yeah.
I mentioned that issue, and obviously with the whole with our minister, and his decision that he made, that kind of, magnified everything a bit more.
You talk, Temba, very calmly about these things, but are there times when they annoy you, when you get fed up and you say, you know what, I can't believe we're still having this conversation?
I think I've got to a point where, I've kind of embraced it. I've kind of accepted the whole attitude, or the whole mindset about it all. So from my side, I don't see a point, in getting worked up about it all, because it's there in front of you. It's not gonna go anywhere. So you just gotta deal with it. And it might be easier in my position for me to adopt this kind of a mindset, and that's what I try advise younger Black African cricketers, when they talk about the different pressures that they face, and they ask about the pressures that I face. And I just try to say to them that there will always be pressures. Everyone faces different pressures. There will be pressures that are common to me as a Black African cricketer to another Black African cricketer. But I think where it matters is dealing with it. Yeah, and just finding a way. I mean, I know that I sound very lackadaisy about it all, but it's just
in fact, you sound very determined. Quite the opposite of lackadaisical.
Yeah, I think because I've experienced it a lot, man, from a young age, so when I see it now, it doesn't surprise me. It doesn't surprise me if I read a comment, in social media, in newspaper, wherever, where, transformation, is put as blame for poor performances. It doesn't surprise me, and it doesn't affect me from a mental point of view.
The coming to play for the Highveld Lions and working with Jeff Toyana, we had him on this same show a couple of months back, and he spoke very highly of you and has obviously enjoyed working with you. How important has it been for you not only to have Jeff as a cricketer who also learned his game in the townships, but Jeff as a batsman, as your coach? How important has that been for you? He's quoted as saying that he's trying to chill at home and the phone rings and it's Temba saying, "Come, coach," and he tries to remind you that he actually has a family, and you say, no, I need you, and I'll meet you in the net. So clearly, there's a bond between you. But describe, if you will, what it's meant for you.
Yeah, I've enjoyed my time with Coach Jeff. When Jeff joined the Lions, I was still a young guy. I mean, a young pup, if I could say. I was about 20, 21, and from there we developed a very strong relationship. And I think the greatest asset of Jeff as a coach, he's been able to break that barrier between player and coach. We don't almost see him as the player. We see him as our friend. Whatever issues we have, outside of cricket, me specifically, I can go to Jeff and say, "Hey Jeff, this is what I'm dealing with. What do you think?" So, our relationship, has been strong because of that. The trust element, is there. I trust Jeff in my game. I know I make him work a lot. He's always complaining to me that I make him come on his off days,
Yes.
to work to have batting sessions. But it's more, he's become more of a mentor. As much as I won't say it to him, but I kind of see him that way, and I think not just for myself. Jeff has been great. Has been great towards everyone. He's done a fantastic job for the Lions. I think he's actually the most successful coach, in the domestic scene ever. If I may be wrong, the trophies that he's won. So I enjoy my time with Jeff, and as long as Jeff is there at the Lions, I'm not going anywhere.
I started off by asking you what you do in the off season, but of course cricket has lots of downtime. During a game, you might be in the stands watching the game. Perhaps you've already batted and there's still a lot of cricket to go. And then on tour, there are days. And I'm sure people imagine, wow, what a glamorous life. You fly around, you're in hotels, you don't have to do anything for yourself. Does it get boring? And how do you fill the time if it does?
It gets very boring, to be honest with you. You can play so much cricket. But when we get back to the hotel, sometimes there's not much to do. And if you're playing in places like India, I'm roaming around the streets. It's not the easiest thing to do. From my side as a hobby, I've started DJing about 3-4 years ago. So that takes up a lot of my spare time. I've got a little set, mixer controller that I travel with. So that takes up a lot of time. And actually, even Kagiso Rabada, we play together in the room, and that comes from my interest in music, house music, to be more specific.